I had moved to Haiti 30 years ago to volunteer. The projects I was working on with them weren't viable. Even though we were doing all this work with animals and agriculture and schools and so on and so forth, as soon as I left, it all collapsed. Became frustrated enough that I quit that job and wrote a white paper describing a way to create another organization that could be different, that would engage the communities and build projects that actually advanced Haiti's development. Over a weekend in August of 1997, we created Haiti Outreach. Our very first project happened in a community of Bohawk, which is just 5 or 6 miles from here.
Donc c'est là nous avons fait la première intervention, nous avons travaillé avec un bon monde, près de 600-800 monde chaque jour. Et c'est la première fois que tout le monde s'est campé devant.
We decided that we needed to set things up so that people were paying for the service of water and shifting the conversation from one of relief, where we have to provide people water. It's our responsibility to get people water, to it being we can be responsible for helping people be responsible. When we did that, we essentially overnight went from half of the wells working to 90% of the wells working. Having a 90% success rate is fantastic. It's better than almost any other program in the world.
C'est le résultat produit qui fait publicité.
That water point needed to be functional, that it needs to be managed. Everyone needs to have sanitation, have a latrine and keep the area clean, that the water itself needs to be potable. And we need to know when somebody looked at that. If somebody looked at it 10 years ago, it's very, very different than knowing that somebody looked at it yesterday. Those 5 things spell out a Creole acronym called FRAPE. If we have a FRAPE water point, in Creole that means it's running the way it should. So if a water point is FRAPE, then we can count all the houses that are within a radius of that. And anyone that walks less than 30 minutes round trip to that water point has access.
Fierté moi c'est l'homme rivé moi de l'eau à frapper. De l'eau à frapper c'est que moi-même pas de travail besoin faire encore, c'est que me fait disciple, moi disciple yo fait travail moi-même te dois faire et sans que moi-même pour c'est pas forcer m'a forcé depuis longtemps. Mais quand y a l'en frapper mon yo et eux même qui prend responsabilité yo connaît qui leur pour faire propre affaire par eux et moi seulement juste observer.
Non, nous prenons de l'eau dans tout sable. On tout non sable là comme ça mais grand rivière et puis on fouille tout là et puis on nettoyer et puis on prend de l'eau. Mais je pas d'aller par de l'eau qui potable, lui c'est de l'eau qui varie. Ça signifie un pile bagaille pour moi. Premièrement, l'aime j'ai de l'eau qui potable, moi boire, li protéger, moi pas malade. Mais tout autant que de l'eau potable, li plus bon pour moi. Et puis tout est pas seul pour moi, li plus bon pour population, pour environnement.
Dormir, me réveiller, moi Haïti, est transformé comme un pays développé.
I don't think we've achieved what we want to achieve. I think we can see where we need to go to achieve what we want to achieve. What we want to achieve here is Haiti being a developed country. And for Haiti to be a developed country, systems need to be put in place that are continuously providing people access to water, access to electricity, people access to education, to healthcare. I do think we can win the game. And I think it's just a matter of enrolling enough people.
Donc si m'ta ouais Haïti t'a développé dans niveau ça, mon cher, même si m'ta mourir, même si mourir m'ta en bataille, cadavre t'a sauvé.
Hi, I'm Sasha Nicole, and this is Neil Van Dyne, Country Director for Haiti Outreach. Today, Neil will share with us about the work that Haiti Outreach is doing in rural communities to help them acquire sustainable access to clean water. Haiti Outreach operates under the philosophy that communities who take responsibility for their own futures will be more successful, so they do not offer handouts, but hand-ups to equip local leaders to take the reins for their own progress and development. This mentality has proven to work for over 10 years, and the data show that over 90% of their wells are still effective and functioning and being managed by the local communities. So I'm sure you will find this model and this work to be very inspiring. So Neil, thank you so much for being with us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So tell us, how many employees does Haiti Outreach have, and of those, how many are American?
We have about 40 employees, 50 employees, I'm sorry, 50 employees in Haiti and 2 or 2.5 in the States.
Okay,
in the States.
Okay, excellent. And can you tell us about the process that a community has to go through before they are approved to enter into a training to receive a well?
Sure. So, I mean, at its core, the lack of water in a country like Haiti is not due to technical issues. It's not because there isn't water or there aren't pumps. It's primarily a breakdown in management and the community's ability to manage that common resource, which is a water point, a public water system delivery mechanism. And so in the world where a community owns their local resources and is responsible for them, they are effective at managing that they have a business plan. And so the biggest part of our conversation is in recognizing that need to have a transformation in the local mindset. And so when we talk about what they go through, it's a set of activities that they go through over a 3 or 4 month period that helps them reorient around what it looks like to manage that common resource.
So my understanding is that the communities undergo a training with your staff. And what does that training look like?
The training uses a lot of the conversations that come out of a Socratic method, in that it's a question and answer where our team, our trainers lead those conversations, and they lead them by asking questions for the most part. So for instance, the very first meeting, when a community makes a request, there's a whole set of steps that make that request and lead up to that first meeting. But in that first meeting, one of the first questions we ask is, okay, great, you want a well. How long do you want that well for? And quite often they haven't thought about the time component around having that water point. And so they have a group conversation around that. And that's like a week, a month, a year. And I remember this one broken, and I saw that one over here, and Uncle Joe had a cow knock his over, and no. And they come to the conclusion that they want to have it all the time. And then we'll ask another question, and that's great that you want to have it all the time, but what kind of water do you want to have all the time? And they have another conversation because they haven't thought about that. And it's rainwater, and it's river water, and it's cholera water, and it's typhoid, and it's ocean water, and salty water, and so on and so forth. And they come around to the world where they want good, clean water that's not going to make them sick. So in that conversation, you start to begin to transform the way they think about this from a way for them to get water, a water point for their community, and move towards what does it look like when they have water all the time. So it's a very, very different perspective.
Yeah. And my understanding is that you have a leadership committee. In every community, there's a leadership committee, and half of the women, at least on the leadership, or half of the committee must at least be women on the committee. Can you say a little bit more as to why that decision was made?
So quite often when you get a request, these are the people who make the requests for their village to have water, or their community to have water, aren't necessarily the ones that are the strongest leaders in the community, or even recognized by the community as leaders. And so when somebody makes those kind of requests, we consider them a provisional committee. And they're the ones that brought the opportunity to their village and created this possibility. And so when we talk about that with them, they begin to develop the idea and own it. And there's about a third of the way through, there's a public meeting where the community stands up and says, okay, we're going to have this water point. And that original provisional committee will sit down and they say, okay, who do you want to lead this? And they have a public conversation around who they think in their village is the best able to lead this and create this in the future.
Mhm.
So one of the parameters, as you mentioned, is that half of the committee be women. Since women are for the most part, the water bearers and the clothes washers and cookers and so on and so forth, they are the ones most directly impacted by accessibility to clean water.
Sure.
So they are the strongest drivers. They're usually the ones that are making sure everybody's fed and clothed and goes to school and so on and so forth. So having them intimately involved in the management of that water point is key.
Right. No, that makes sense. They always should be at the table if they're going to be the ones gathering it every day. So yeah, that makes really good sense. And then my understanding too is that you involve the local water authorities. Can you say more about the reasoning
Sure.
behind that, and how successful has that been, or how has that progressed in your work?
Yeah, so ultimately, it's easy and sexy to have somebody drill a well, right? And this way most organizations market that around the world is that we're bringing water. But just putting a well in and putting a hand pump on it isn't enough, right? It needs to be managed. And having access to water is actively part of a system, what we call a systems approach. And that system includes not only constructing that physical infrastructure, but also training somebody to operate it, training somebody to repair it. And on top of that, that there's an authority above that operator who says he's doing a good job or not doing a good job, who can remove and replace that authority. And above that, there's a regulator. So there's a hierarchical system that's required to really drive it forward in all aspects. And so in a country like Haiti, you have a government official that's essentially responsible for potable water and sanitation. That in Haiti is part of the Ministry of Public Works, that they have a national direction for potable water and sanitation. And so we make sure that all of the places where we deliver water infrastructure are authorized, aligned, and part of the system of management of the National Water Authority.
And can you say a little bit about M-Water? I understand it's a tool that Haiti Outreach has developed to make your data more accessible and transparent. How did that come to be,
Sure.
and how do you foresee that being beneficial not only to Haiti Outreach, but to any other stakeholders who'd be interested in utilizing that data?
Sure. First, a clarification. I wouldn't say that Haiti Outreach developed M-Water. M-Water is its own company.
No, but you...
That is a tool that creates a tool that became useful to us in this conversation. And so when you talk about the need to manage a system or manage a set of points or manage anything, you need a set of tools to do that. And some businesses would use something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet to manage their business. Some use QuickBooks to manage the books. Some use timesheets and calendars. These are sets of tools that are effective in managing your day and managing your workflow. And so M-Water is an online tool that allows us to manage and oversee spatially where these communities are. And we use that tool in our workflow to see which communities are functioning well and not functioning well.
Okay. Excellent. And it's not just limited to Haiti Outreach. Others can benefit from your data.
Oh, yeah. So we make portions of our data publicly available, where the water point is, whether it's clean and functional and potable. That information is public, but M-Water allows for hierarchical access to that data. And so there are privacy aspects of that, like who is the person in charge and what's his phone number and his email, that those are part of that data set, but not made publicly publicly available.
Got it. Excellent. And so if anybody listening wanted to either support your work or learn more about your work, what would be a good way for them to find out more about that?
Sure. The easiest place to start is on our website, haitioutreach.org.
Okay.
And there you can connect with any members of the team that you need to. If you have questions, that's the best place to start.
Excellent. Okay. And what are some of the, I mean, in Haiti in general, you've been there for how long has it been now? 30 years or more?
Yeah, I've been here over 30 years
Over
now.
30 years. Okay. So you know Haiti pretty well. What are some of the barriers that people in Haiti face towards improving their situations?
Boy, that's a tough one. There's a whole host of them, but
Yeah.
one of the biggest challenges in Haiti is that it's over the years and over the decades, it's kind of become an out of control recipient of aid,
Mm.
an aid that's focused on relief. And so when we talk about the difference between relief and development, they're both very much needed, and they're both kind of distinct. When we talk about relief, we talk about a world where something has happened that disrupts the systems that society functions with. And when I say that, I'm saying that very intentionally, like the electrical grid is a system, that your municipal water supply is a system, that your school educational system, your medical systems, your so on and so forth. And so in a relief environment, what's happened is that there's a hurricane or tornado or blizzard or COVID or something like that that happens to disrupt the way those systems normally allow society to function. And in that environment, we have to act. We have to do whatever's necessary to keep people alive. And if that means everybody wearing a mask, or if it means putting bottles of water on a plane and shipping them to an earthquake zone, that's what we have to do. But that's a very short-term world. And in that short-term world, it's relief. We have to do whatever we have to do. That's different and distinct from development, where we as a community or as internally, as citizens of this community, decide that we want to develop a higher level systems for our society. We want to develop a school network, or we want to develop a water network, or we want to develop an electrical grid. That's us as citizens and not an external force. The Germans didn't show up in the United States and say, you guys need an electrical grid, right? We just decided that on our own and made that happen. And in Haiti, that's kind of what happened. It happened in reverse. So you have everybody saying, we need schools. And so you have hundreds of thousands of independent schools, and the communities as a whole, these elected officials never have an opportunity to have a public conversation around, say, developing a water system for their community, or developing a school system for their commune or town. So that's really, I think, is a very important distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So,
how do you see that kind of experience impact the mentality of the people in Haiti?
Oh, well, in a relief mindset, people are recipients, right? If something's happened to me, I'm disenfranchised for some reason, there's an earthquake or whatever, and people send me aid, and I'm a recipient, But in that development conversation, I'm very, very much a participant. It's me, it's my family, it's my community, and I am the participant. Mm-hmm. So, with this out of control aid relief conversation, everybody is paralyzed by, everybody's just looking for how much they can get and not how much they can participate.
Got it. So it sounds like the mentality, or a lot of what your work it does, is to shift the mentality from waiting for a rescuer to come and fix the problem to the community saying, okay, we're going to fix the problem. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when we show up, that's what people are looking at, right? Here's another savior. Somebody else is going to save us. Somebody else is going to do this. And it's it's, everybody likes that. Everybody likes to be seen as the champion, as the white knight, or whatever you want to say it. And that's why it's so important for us to have that conversation like, okay, yeah, we can help you, but what does that look like when you're managing it over time?
Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very different because we shift that from them seeing us as a sponsor of relief for their community to us as an active participant in the development of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I suppose, I mean, my next question was, how is Haiti Outreach different from a traditional humanitarian organization? And you've touched on that a little bit, but any other comments to make on that?
Yeah, I mean, relief is always going to be necessary. I don't want to knock relief because even we as Haiti Outreach do relief. I mean, when the earthquake happened or there's floods or hurricanes, we do stop our development efforts and move into a relief mode. But that's concentrated and focused in over a couple month period to get in and out of there. We'll shut down our drilling rigs and move the water trucks and haul water to people.
Yeah.
What makes us different? I think it's just the ability to distinguish those conversations and keep focused on Haiti being a developed nation.
Excellent. How do you measure your impact from the work that you do?
So we measure our impact in terms of the infrastructure that's actively monitored and maintained by the communities. And so worldwide, only about half of the water and sanitation infrastructure that's built is operational. Most of them fail within 3 years of building. And, for the first 15 years of our work here, that's about the same level of success we had. Basically, half of everything we did in the first 15 years was broken or not functional. And that's what led us to understand that it was a management challenge and there was a transformation required. And when we did that, when we started to implement it and treat it as that transformational problem, we jumped to 90% of them working. So for the last 15 years, more than 90% of our infrastructure is still actively maintained, managed, and operated by the community with essentially no input or feedback from us.
And how do you keep track of that?
Well, so for the most part, it happens with a phone call once a month. But the committee in charge of those water points provides a report that says, here's how many people paid, here's how much money we collected, here's how much money we saved. That money goes into a bank account, but not us. It's not managed by us. They simply report on what they've got.
Got it.
So we track that in M-Water. We track all those reports in M-Water using that tool.
And you also use an acronym called FRAPE. Can you explain what does FRAPE mean in Creole, for one, and what does it stand for? Sure.
So in a system, you talk about a certain set of indicators that you need to manage that. And if you're a business with employees, you manage whether your employee is at work on time, whether he leaves early or when he takes his lunch breaks. You have a tool called a clock, and they clock in and they clock out, and that's how you manage all these different employees. So for us, we needed to develop a set of indicators that would let us know whether that infrastructure was satisfactory for the community. And that basically comes down to 5 major indicators. Is the water point functional? That means that if at any given point in time somebody wants water, that they can get water out of it. That water point also deliver water that's potable. That water point be managed. That everyone in the area have a latrine or a septic tank, that they're not defecating in the open. And also that water point be inspected regularly. So if I know it's functional, potable, and everybody's got latrines and everything's working, it's one thing to know that was great 10 years ago. It's very different than knowing it was that way yesterday. And so in the Haitian language, there's a word called FRAPE, and those 5 things spell out a Haitian word that's called FRAPE. And in English, that basically means that it's working, it's banging on all cylinders, it's working the way it should. So we use that FRAPE set of indicators as a simple way of monitoring whether everything's working the way it should.
Okay, excellent. You know, in the several years that you've done this, is there any, I mean, I'm sure you've encountered a lot of different people in a lot of different communities that have touched you personally, but can you share one example of a community that's really impressed you?
Yeah, there's a whole host of them, right? Everything from, women whose husbands left them and abandoned them with 5 kids, who stand up and realize the necessity of them and their kids having access to sanitation, and they work to build a latrine in their community, for their family, so they can stop defecating in the open, and being an honorable and respected member of that community.
Mm.
It allows them to show up as leaders, where they move from this world where there's an abandoned woman with just kids, and now this woman becomes a leader in her community.
Mm.
We had another community who went through this whole training process, and then near the end, when we drilled for them, we couldn't find water, and we had to leave the village. Well, they were so determined to have water, they met themselves, the committee of 4 or 5 people, including 3 women, climbed and got on foot and walked for miles out to the road, got on a motorcycle, got on public transport, and basically took 2 days to get to our office to plead their case for us to try again.
Wow.
And our team was so moved by that we went back out and tried to find water again, and were successful.
Mhm.
So that's a community that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Well, there are lots of them. For every community has its own story.
I mean, that's a huge statement, to spend 2 days en route just to have water, when, so many of us in the developed world, it's just feet away from, it's right in your kitchen. You just turn on the faucet and you have it right there. But we don't always realize, like, what an investment that is, and what a huge change that is for people in their communities. Because after after Haiti Outreach drills, my understanding is that now the community members have it within 500 meters of their home. So in walking, minutes, what would that be? About 5 to 10?
That's 30-minute round trip.
It's 30-minute round trip. Okay. And what would it be to go to a stream or a river on average, what do you think?
Oh, well, it varies dramatically. The spatial component of the M-Water tool allows us to visualize where water infrastructure needs to happen. So when communities come to us, it gives us a systematic and data-driven framework for deciding where to invest resources and where they can have the most and longest impact.
Mm-hmm.
So there are communities that are right along rivers. There are communities that are really far away from water points. There are communities that live in areas where there's salty water underground, and they can't, even though there's access to that salty aquifer, they can't use it or drink it. So, there's almost an infinite number of challenges in that. So having a systematic set of tools that start to break those the different needs into different solutions is part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see Haiti Outreach going in the next 5 to 10, 20 years? What's the long range vision for Haiti Outreach right now?
Great question. So our model has been very, very successful. It's one of the best and strongest models in the world. And one of the partners that we've engaged with is Rotary International.
Mm-hmm.
So Rotary International and several districts of Rotary International have taken on this set of tools. We've gifted them this set of tools and conversations and technology, and they are taking that on to scale that across the country. So scaling that model out across the country and using partners in this data-driven decision-making and a set of tools is really the future. And so, by supporting Haiti Outreach and the conversations that we have, we're having an impact across a significant portion of the world.
Mm-hmm. So essentially your goal is not to just stay in your northern region where you're doing your work, but you want this to expand to everywhere in Haiti.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I guess I should say that for the most part, a lot of groups are focused just on an individual area where they are, but our work and our model have been successful across Haiti, essentially in every corner of the country.
Mhm.
But a small organization like Haiti Outreach, we can't have an impact across the whole country
Right.
by building physical infrastructure. Ultimately, we have to enroll partners into a conversation that allows us to scale that. And so bringing this model to scale is our next challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I think it's phenomenal what you're doing. I mean, the model clearly is working. 90% over years of data is really, I mean, that in and of itself speaks volumes. So just one more time, if somebody wanted to support your work or learn more, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
Sure. Again, the easiest way to contact us is at our website, haitioutreach.org.
Okay. Well, Neil, thank you so much for meeting today. It's been a pleasure. And if you have any other comments or things you'd like to make, let us know. Anything we should know about your work?
No, thanks a lot for taking the time to listen and talk. And we look forward to hearing from everybody.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Here at Emanate International, it is our mission to promote nonprofits and social enterprises that equip their recipients to become independent, autonomous, thriving members of society. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you will be in the know for future inspirational conversations with other leaders who are making great gains and improving our world. Thank you.